Hey guys, what is up and welcome to a new League of Legends video. So it has been 3 weeks since patch 6.22 has hit the PvE servers, the preseason patch, so one with all of the huge changes, the assassin rework, the jungle rework, and all of that good stuff. And it just so happens that this big patch is going to be hitting the live server in just a couple of days, if not less. So just like we do with every single patch rundown video, I'll be going over all of the major changes and the things that you really need to know when going into the new patch, because well, there is quite a lot to cover. So I'll do my very best to try and cover as much as possible, all of the important information as quick as possible as well. So if you end up enjoying this video or finding it useful, don't forget to hit that like button to show your support. But without further ado, let's get right into the changes. So without question, one of the biggest new changes, big changes coming to the patch of 6.22 is definitely the Assassin update. If you are unaware, there are 4 big changes happening to Katarina, LeBlanc, Rengar, and Talon, and 6 smaller changes happening to Akali, Echo, Fizz, Kha'Zix, Shaco, and Zed. So let's go through a very quick brief rundown for all of these changes. Katarina now essentially just requires a lot more skill to play, and there's a lot more thought process behind actually executing her abilities. She now works around throwing daggers and picking them up off of the ground, which in turn procs a spinning type ability that does damage, which is her ult W, and for the most part, other than that, she is fairly the same. And she's probably the 3rd strongest of the 4 major assassin changes in my personal opinion. Following Katarina, we also have LeBlanc, which for the most part is still fairly similar in concept, but now has a passive which procs upon attacking them with a spell, which will in turn proc again if you hit them with another spell, dealing bonus damage. Combining her Q now with a passive will actually give her a pretty impressive amount of wave clear, because the Q will bounce to all nearby targets, and she also has a 2-part ultimate, one of them which will just simply create a mimic of her somewhere around the map, which will cast the last most recent spell you have used to try and trick your opponents, while also having the second part of it where you can mimic any one of your QWE spells while in turn also empowering it. So of the 4 changes, she has to be probably the weakest, because I feel like it's going to be fairly easy to play around her ultimate once you're used to it. So other than that, she's very strong and does provide some serious wave clear now, but definitely probably the weakest of the 4. Next up, we have also Rengar as a part of the big changes to the assassins. Now again, Rengar is still going to be in concept very similar, go into stealth mode, which is now camouflage, not actual invisibility, meaning that if someone on the enemy team is too close to you, they will see you. His ferocity now only goes up to 4 stacks, not 5, but he gets a free stack essentially just using his passive to jump on a target if that's the first thing he has done to the target. His Q ability is now a 2-part attack type ability, which is somewhat of a skill shot, and his W now will give you HP back when you use it while taking damage over the last second or 2. His ult will also offer a free critical strike on one of the targets you jump on. So his burst combo is still very much there if he's fed, and especially late game, he will still do an insane amount of damage. His Q scales very well, and he still has that one-shot potential. In my opinion, he's probably the 2nd strongest of the 4 big changes, but moving on to the strongest one and the final one of the big 4, we have Talon. He now has a passive where if you hit someone with 3 spells, you will now proc it with an auto attack, causing them to bleed. His Q ability has 2 parts to it, one that's a melee critical strike if you use it in the face of the person, or the second part, you can use it from range and jump at the target and deal reduced damage. His W and ult are pretty much the same, but his E ability will now pretty much let him parkour over terrain across Summoner's Rift, making it next to impossible to actually catch him. So when you combine the parkour and just the amount of damage he can do and his level 2 burst with Ignite, I have to say Talon might be the strongest of the big 4. And then we have, of course, the 6 assassin champions, Akali, Echo, Fizz, Kha'Zix, Shaco, Zed, which have smaller changes happening to them, which I will not go over too specifically in this video, but very briefly, Akali can now teleport with her W, Echo just scales better with AP, Fizz's ultimate now scales based on range thrown, Kha'Zix has new bonuses to his evolutions, Shaco now has boxes that spawn upon death with his ultimate, and Zed's ultimate now steals AD from the previous target he has killed with Deathmark, assuming that that target offers more AD to Zed than the previous one he's already killed. Alright, so now that we got all of that out of the way, let's move on to the next big change happening to patch 6.22. There's going to be a new stealth shimmer effect, which is just very quick to talk about, but also very important. So there are 2 types of stealth now, camouflage and invisibility. Invisibility is, as it sounds, you're just simply stealth and you can go anywhere and be beside anyone and they will not see you unless you're beside a turret or something. But then there's also camouflage, which is pretty much what Evelyn currently is, where if you're too close to someone, they will see you. But other than that, you are pretty much just invisible and no one can see you other than towers and champions nearby. But now this new shimmer effect is when you damage a champion that's invisible or camouflage with an ability, so maybe like a skill shot like Ezreal's Q, a brief image of them will appear to kind of give you an idea as to where they are. It's just the outline of the champion, not the champion themselves, so you can't actually click on them. But it does let you know maybe what direction they're facing or where they're potentially going, and it just shows you that you have indeed hit the champion. So this is definitely going to be very useful when trying to track down one of these sneaky champions trying to get away. Another huge change coming this patch are the ones happening in the jungle, whether it's to the actual smite itself, the camps, or something like the plants. So let us first talk about Smite. It will now restore 100 HP and 10% of maximum when used on monsters, because now red buff will actually no longer give you HP back when you smite it. On top of this, Smite's recharge rate has been increased to a charge every 90 seconds from 75. The ammo charge starts at 1 minute and 40 seconds instead of 1 minute and 25 seconds into the game, and like I said, smiting camps and getting that extra buff, like red buff giving you the HP, the blue buff giving you mana, or maybe the raptors giving you that vision when you smite them, this no longer exists. On top of this, there's also plants now being added into the jungle, and there's 3 types of them. The first one is called a blast cone, which is the red plant. When you auto attack it, it pretty much acts like a Ziggs W. All the people around it will get knocked up to a certain area around that plant, but you can use this to go over certain walls and even make some sweet escapes. Next up, you have another plant called the honey fruit, which spawns in the river. When you kill this one, it will drop a bunch of fruit on the ground that you can pick up, and it gives you HP, but you also get slowed as you're picking them up. So this one is actually pretty useful because from what I've noticed, the HP you get from it is actually quite good. So if you're maybe someone like a top laner and you push in the lane and you want to get a bit of sustain going and the plant has just spawned right under you in the river, this is going to be very useful. But the final plant is going to be the Scryer's Bloom, spawning in the jungle as well, where you auto attack it and it just gives you vision towards an area into which you attack it. This one is very useful to try and maybe spot someone now, maybe spot the enemy team, see what buffs are up, see what camps are up. But from my playtesting on the PBE server, I have noticed that these plants, they weren't as impactful as you may think. I mean, yeah, they definitely have their uses and every now and then they're pretty damn useful, but at the end of the day, they don't have the biggest impact in the entire world. They just kind of are there when they are there and you pick them up, and they do help every now and then, but it won't just completely change your game around. But this is only from playing on the PBE for just a bit. Once people start getting used to them and start actually thinking of sweet strategies, these plants can definitely have a big impact. And the final thing related to the jungle is how all the jungle monsters and camps will be scaling. So now it will be scaling based on the level brackets within the game, and per level bracket, so levels 1 to 3, 4 to 6, 7 to 9, and 9 plus, the monsters in the camps will just get stronger, getting more health, more resistances, and more damage. The blue and red buff camps no longer have those small little monsters beside them. The raptor camp now has a total of 5 small raptors. The gromp no longer poisons and spawns 15 seconds later than the other camps. And the large and normal Krugs now on death split into smaller Krugs, which take a bit longer to kill and honestly is kind of annoying to kill as well, but it is about 150% more rewarding than other camps. There are also some changes happening to the mastery trees, where some of them are being added, others are being shifted around, and some of them even being reworked. Now, there's just a little too much to talk about for this one specifically because I did make a video talking about the mastery changes solely, so if you want to know more about that, then definitely make sure to check out that video. I have a link to it down in the description below. But for the sake of this video and not making it too long, I'm going to go ahead and sort of skip over the masteries, but there are some new changes here that I recommend you read out and find out. Next up, we also have a rework happening to Alistar. His passive and his E ability are getting some massive changes, so let's start talking about his passive first. It now states the following: Alistar gains a triumph stack whenever he stuns or displaces enemy champions or nearby enemies die. At 7 stacks, Alistar roars, healing himself for 20 HP and his nearest ally champion for 40 HP, 3-second cooldown. He cannot get triumph stacks while Triumphant Roar is on cooldown, and the death of an enemy champion or epic monster fully charges Alistar's roar. Following this, talking about his E ability next, which is called Trample, it now states the following: Alistar tramples the ground, ignoring unit collision and dealing base damage plus 40% AP magic damage over 5 seconds to nearby enemies. Each pulse that damages at least one enemy champion grants Alistar a trample stack. At 5 trample stacks, Alistar empowers his next basic attack against an enemy champion to deal an additional 50 magic damage and stun for 1 second. So the very first thing you should think of is, well, his E ability, which used to be just a heal, now has a stun for 1 second effect. His Q and W are already CC effects to begin with, so Alistar pretty much now has every single ability to be able to CC a target, so I mean when it comes to being the king of CC, Alistar might be the champion to go to. And following this, champions like Evelynn, Wukong, etc. that have stealth mechanics are obviously getting that new shimmer effect on them whenever they get damaged by a spell. So you guys already should know this, especially if you already listened to the part where I talk about the shimmer effect, but just to kind of remind you and bring it back all together, all of these stealth champions will now have the shimmer effect on them. Next up, let's quickly talk about some of the buffs that are coming for this patch, and the first one we'll talk about is Ivern. So Ivern has been somewhat lackluster for quite some time ever since his release, and even after a hotfix mid-patch, he's still somewhat weak. So he's receiving some yet additional buffs coming this patch, first of which being to his Q. It has had his cooldown lowered at every single rank by a few seconds, and he can now reactivate his Q with the press of the button instead of having to click, so you have the option. On top of this, his ultimate Daisy has received some buffs as well, where the HP not only has been increased by just a little bit, nothing too crazy as you level it up, but the AI for Daisy has also been improved to make her more responsive and just work overall better. So the question is, will this be enough to bring Ivern back to where he maybe should be? Honestly, chances are probably not, but at least it's still a step in the right direction for this very lackluster champion. Following this, Twitch is also getting some buffs to the point where you can even almost call it a very small rework. The first one being to his Q ability, where he now camouflages, not goes invisible whenever he obviously activates the ability, but he does stay camouflaged for pretty much almost double the duration as prior to while being invisible. The bonus movement speed while stealth, or camouflage in this case, has been lowered by just a little bit, nothing too crazy though, but he now triples in movement speed whenever he's near an enemy champion that cannot see him, just sort of kind of giving him that assassin feel as if he's ready to go in for the kill. And on top of this, his W Venom Cask also has a little bit of a new effect now, where initially, yeah, when you throw it, it'll still apply the passive, it'll still have that AoE slow, but it will also cause that slow to linger on the ground for 3 seconds, adding poison over time and slowing people within it for that full duration. So just making an ability that was somewhat useful, just a lot more useful now. Now another big change coming to this patch is the fact that not only are pink wards being removed, but they're also being replaced by something called a control ward. These control wards only cost you 75 gold, but they disable and reveal nearby wards and traps, and also reveal nearby camouflaged units. So when you have a champion that's actually just flat out invisible, maybe like a Shackle Q ability, well, you're not going to be able to see them anyway whatsoever anymore unless you have the Oracle Lens or the Brissada Tower. But the control ward is pretty much the new pink ward. And talking more about the Assassin update coming, Lethality is a new stat that is replacing flat armor penetration. Now, in terms of how it works, it's actually very similar in concept, but it now scales with how much armor it's actually penetrating based on your opponent's level. So it will give the owner a mix of flat penetration split between a base amount and an amount that scales with the target's level, so essentially it just makes it not as effective or as strong when you just rush the stats, but it does make it work throughout the game and be much more reliable later on into the game for all of the AD assassins like Zed, Talon, Rengar, etc. And like I said, Lethality is replacing flat armor penetration, so items before that had flat armor penetration like Duskblade, Youmuu's, Mob Malmortius, all of them are having it replaced with Lethality now, so it kind of makes the item feel almost new. But speaking of which, there is a new assassin item coming out, which is called Edge of the Night. Costing you 3100 gold, building from a pickaxe, a dirk, and a null magic mantle. This one gives you 60 AD, 35 magic resistance, 15 lethality, 20 movement speed out of combat, and an effect where after you activate it and channel it for 1.5 seconds, which can be used while moving, you get a shield on you that will block the next enemy ability that lasts for 10 seconds and has a 45-second cooldown. Now this is important because Mob Malmortius, your only other real AD item that you can get for countering AP damage, no longer grants lethality. Because now Mob Malmortius instead offers you cooldown reduction, which is a little bit weird, but I guess it makes sense since it'll just be way too many items with the lethality stats, making it too overpowered. But I also want to quickly talk about Duskblade of Drakthar because again, for the most part, it's still very similar in concept, but it now offers lethality, the movement speed out of combat, and a new effect called Night Stalker, where when you're unseen for at least 1 second, your next attack against the champion will do bonus true damage based on how much lethality you have, plus 200%. But on top of this, it seems like the old Raptor buff that you used to get when you smite the camp is now being moved to Duskblade of Drakthar because this item will instantly spot out wards whenever the effect is obviously not on cooldown, and you can instantly kill the ward as well. But speaking of new items, there's also another new item called the Knight's Vow, which is sort of a new support item. The active effect lets you choose an ally champion as your partner, very similar to how maybe something like Callista's Spear works. And if your partner is nearby, you gain plus 40 additional armor and 15% movement speed towards them. And the second passive effect is if your partner is nearby, heal for 12% of the damage your partner deals to champions and redirect 12% of damage your partner takes from champions to you as true damage. This is the perfect item to get for tanky supports that want to protect their ADC. You also have a new item called Poacher's Dirk, which is just a very early jungle item for AD junglers that they can get, which will slowly build into the serrated Dirk based on how many jungle monsters they have killed. And there's yet another new support item called Redemption, which costs you 2100 gold, will give you a bunch of stats and a bunch of regeneration, but the active effect is the coolest thing. Because even while you're dead, you can actually use this, and within an area within 5500 range, after 2.5 seconds, you call down a beam of light, which will not only heal allies, but also burn enemy champions for 10% of their maximum health as true damage, and deal 250 true damage to enemy minions. This one is going to be extremely cool to see, and if you're a support main, I mean, I won't blame you if you want to get this item pretty much every single game. There's also a bunch of other changes happening to other support items, and even some of the other items such as Banner of Command that I don't want to talk about because they aren't absolutely massive, but if you want to have a read for them yourself, I have a link to a Surrender at 20 website where you can check this all out. But a couple other things I want to talk about is Face of the Mountain, which now whenever you use it on an ally to shield them, you will also get the shield for yourself, which I think is absolutely wonderful. And Abyssal Scepter, which now no longer reduces enemy magic resistance by 10 to 25, but now instead has an aura which increases the magic damage taken by enemies by 10%. And the final thing I want to very quickly mention throughout this video is the fact that there are some sweet new skins coming out. For instance, we have Victorious Maokai coming out, Karthus, Lightbane, and we have also Jace Brighthammer, which I think just looks absolutely wonderful. You have a very kind of troll skin called Bard, and many others as well.